Hello there, I am Penflower and welcome to Ink Piece Episode 5, Fellowship of the Ink. In this video, you'll be seeing me designing and colouring a character in both my traditional and digital styles. I also want to talk a little bit about one of my favourite genres, fantasy. Here you can see me sketching out the character, a hooded goblin. I wasn't really thinking too deeply about who they are while drawing, but I like the various interpretations that are possible. Are they an apprentice mage, hopelessly lost amongst the shelves of ancient tomes in a dark library? Or maybe they're a thief trying to sneak out of a wizard's tower, a stolen spellbook under their arm. For most of my childhood and adolescence, I wasn't really interested in fantasy. I mostly favoured superhero comics, science fiction, and swashbuckling adventure. I saw all three Lord of the Rings films when they came out at the cinema, but while I enjoyed them, I wasn't as captivated by them as I am now. Indeed, it feels almost surreal thinking about how much I love those films today and how little I thought about them when they were first taking the world by storm. I think the change in my attitude towards fantasy must have happened around about the time I watched two much older films for the first time, The Princess Bride and Disney's The Black Cauldron. I think both of these films really capture the type of fantasy I most enjoy, a kind of whimsical, sometimes adventurous, but mostly cozy fantasy. It wasn't too long after that I read the books the films are based on, and then started re-evaluating the works of Tolkien. To date, my absolute favourite adaptation of his work is the 1968 BBC radio dramatisation of The Hobbit. I think this was also the period in which I started to become interested in the concept of fantasy as a role-playing genre. That journey began, as I may have mentioned in a previous video, with the rediscovery of some old fighting fantasy adventure game books, which had lain dormant and dusty in a box for half a decade. As products of their time, the older fighting fantasy books can be problematic, to say the least. They share some of the same troublesome issues as Tolkien's works, and sometimes to a far worse degree. But the aesthetics and often very weird subject matter absolutely enthralled me. Whenever I was back in England, I would visit the local charity shops and purchase any game books I could find. After a while, though, the limitations of the books started to lessen my enjoyment. The clue's in the title, of course, but at a certain point I wanted the option to resolve conflicts without fighting. Why was I never allowed to befriend the orc, or challenge the gorgon to a riddle? That's when I discovered the big dragon game, old D&D. At around the same time that it was experiencing its renaissance after the release of its 5th edition. I became pretty much obsessed with the game for the next 4 years, until I realised that while it did technically offer more options than just whacking things with a sword or blasting them with a spell, it still felt mostly geared towards combat. I ended up homebrewing so much whenever I played that I eventually decided I might as well play other systems, or make my own, which coincidentally is what I've been doing ever since. Regardless of my feelings towards game books or popular RPG systems, my love for high adventure mixed with fairy tale whimsy and weirdness has not diminished. I also think it is perfectly possible to extricate it from some of the outdated and even dangerous themes that certain reactionaries think are intrinsic to its nature. I hold that fantasy can and should exist without things like innate moral alignments, institutional sexism, and ableism. Tropes and recurring motifs are perhaps more characteristic of fantasy than other genres, but I feel that affords more opportunities to play with and subvert them. Give me stories of wise goblin wizards, fairy bandits, and giant princesses rescuing dragons from bloodthirsty knights. It's also worth mentioning that while most of fantasy is usually inspired by medieval Europe and its folklore, there is a growing number of examples of the genre from other cultures and contexts around the world. I'm already interested in reading works by N.K. Jemisin and Hafsa Faisal, but any other recommendations of non-Eurocentric fantasy books by non-white authors are welcome in the comments. Getting back to what you're seeing on screen, I decided to do two versions of the same character because I really enjoy both of these styles, and I was interested in exploring how to represent the same lighting effect with pen and pencil and then digitally. Originally both goblins were going to have the same warm colour palette, but then I decided to give the digital version a colder light. I like how the two versions contrast and offer up different potential stories for the character. Which goblin do you like best? That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. In case you missed it, I recently published a trailer and release date announcement for my new pocket fantasy RPG, Stravagante. There's links to that video, as well as my newsletter, the Penflower Post, my shop, Itch.io page, Patreon, and Ko-fi, all in the description below. So, until next time, bye bye.